Welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe, the podcast about the human experience.
Tommy Harrison, welcome to the Center of the Universe.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Tommy, I have to admit, I probably watched you play in Richmond back in the day. I was in my 20s at the time. You and I are about the same age. I'm a little bit older than you. Because you had a significant minor league career, and we're going to talk a lot more about that. But I had certainly heard your name and associated with the Braves organization when I was a 20-something. And then Kevin Flippin tells me that you're his son's pitching instructor. Is that the best way to think about it?
Well, yeah, pitching, hitting. After I got done with the Braves, or actually when I was playing with the Braves here in Richmond, I started doing camps and clinics. Kind of doing it for nothing, and then decided to, kind of make it a side gig. And, over the years, I've dealt with a lot of kids in the area, pretty much all over the state. So it's just, yeah. And then, Kevin gave me a call, and I started working with, Briggs and Stratton. So
is that what you call him?
That's what I call him.
That's a good name. You and I are going to have fun today, Tommy.
Yeah, he's a good little player.
Yeah, he's got some pop in his bat. I've noticed a couple times I've watched him. But you're the expert. We won't say anything negative about Briggs or any holes in his game on this recording. All right, so I think you intentionally flashed your Ohio State, Michigan banner at me. You're an Ohio State guy. You grew up in Ohio, right?
Yes, sir.
What do you have to say to any Michigan fans that might be listening right now?
Well, I never say that word. I usually say Michigan. I'm from Southwest Dayton, Ohio, and grew up a Buckeye, and definitely a diehard Reds fan. And my dad went to Ohio State, and his history professor at the time was Woody Hayes. Everybody knows him. So, I'll show you a little something about Woody right here. You guys can see that.
Wow,
that's Woody right there. But yeah, I'm in the Ohio State Michigan room here at the house, and it's basically house divided, which is what we call it, and the room is divided right down the center, going caddy side to side in the corners, and one side's Ohio State, as you can see over here, and then this is all Ohio State over here, and then if you go the other way,
holy cow,
there's all Michigan over there, but I call it Michigan. I never pronounce the M, but it's a good rivalry. I've been involved in it since birth, basically growing up in Ohio, and one of my closest high school buddies was a Michigan fan. So, it's a good rivalry. And now, I married a big fan, and her father and parents and grandparents are from Michigan, and whatever. So it's a good rivalry. It gives us something to talk about year to year.
Was there ever a moment of hesitation for either you or Carrie, whether you're going to get married or not, because of who you were fans of?
I don't think so. I think it was friendly rivalry, get to, jab at each other throughout the year, whoever wins and loses. And, for a while there, it was the team up north was winning a lot of ball games. And then we, through the 2000s, I think we pretty much dominated the rivalry tier to the last, 3 or 4 years when hairball got involved. And, we turned the tide and come with a national championship. So it's a good rivalry, and it's fun. And, after the game, it is what it is. You can't change it. You can't take it away. It's fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, especially when it's really competitive, and that has been a very competitive rivalry for a really, really long time.
Yeah.
The idea of losing to Michigan in the regular season, and a lot of fans will say, hey, as long as we beat Ohio State, or if the other side says, or your side says, as long as we beat Michigan, it's a good season. But what's it like to as a fan, to have your team lose to Michigan and then win the national championship?
Well, at the beginning of the year, everybody's, counts down the days to the last game of the year for the rivalry game. But, let's be honest, the big picture is win the national title. Some people think if you win that game, you won the national title. Hell, that's one ball game. I think it woke him up, smacked him right square dead in the mouth. Ryan Day's job's on the line. Adversity, perseverance, all those, adjectives you want to use. And they went on probably the greatest 4-game run in the history of college football. And since college football started with all the bowl games and whatnot, I believe Ohio State's won all the new ones. So, they're the first at the BCS back early 2000s. And then they changed it up to a 12-team playoff or whatever it was this year. And then went ahead and Ryan Day finally got to the top. So, so here it is again, a new year, okay, you won the national title. It's what are you going to do this year? So.
Yeah. To your point about that 4-game streak, they looked impossible to beat in those games.
They, the question mark was Will Howard. He won at, Kansas State. What was he? Pac-10 Player of the Year or whatnot. Threw for a lot of yards. Ohio State gets him this year, and he meshed right away. They had probably top 2 tandem in the backfield in the country, and Henderson from Hopewell, which I think is awesome, for Virginia. And then you got, Judkins that moved over and joined up, and Henderson wasn't selfish and whatnot. They just exchanged carries and touchdowns and split the games up. They both went over 1,000 yards apiece. Basically a team game. One guy's not going to win a national title for you. Jeremiah Smith's probably the top player in the country for the next 3 years if he stays, So the greatest 4 games, I'd say, boom, 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 it was incredible. They put it on Tennessee, and then we had the rematch with Oregon, which the first game was a great game. It come down to the wire. And then, you play Quinn Ewers, who was a Buckeye, and Jack Sawyer stripped for a touchdown that sealed the deal. So, and then, in the championship game, it was Notre Dame. And, Notre Dame's a good football team year in and year out. They win 10, 12 games a year. I wish they were in a conference, but they never probably will be. But that was a great game. Marcus Freeman, Buckeye. It seems, I'm not trying to be biased, but it seems like players and coaches, they come through Ohio State somehow, some way. So.
Yeah, and back to your Woody Hayes picture, that reminded me back in the day, I'm guessing 50s, 60s, and 70s, you guys had Woody. Penn State had Joe Paterno, and Joe was teaching history like that as well. But it is such a highly specialized endeavor now to run a football team, to win a national championship, to bring in a bunch of money to the university. But it's wild to think that Woody was coaching football and teaching history to your dad. That's crazy.
Yeah, back then it was, they probably went to class every day and then had workouts, I think it's a little bit different nowadays sport, but it's pretty neat to be able to say that my dad's history professor was Woody Hayes back in the day. And if you have any idea about college football, everybody knows who Woody Hayes is. So, your average Joe probably doesn't know what I'm talking about, but yeah, that's pretty special.
Yeah, if you follow college football and you're over the age of, I don't know, 40, you have to know who Woody Hayes is. There's no way to escape that. Yeah.
Correct.
All right. Growing up in Ohio, give me an idea. Did you grow up in like the burbs? Did you grow up on a farm? Like where'd you grow up?
Well, I lived in the country, but I lived in a neighborhood out in the country. It was a brand new neighborhood. I think we were like the 6th house in the neighborhood before it all grew up, as people started moving into town. But it was a small country school. I say country because it was in the country, but it's a city school. But Southwest Dayton, about 30 minutes from University of Dayton. Big football town. You grow up in Ohio, you're playing football somehow, some way, from Pee Wee on up to junior high to JV to varsity, with those aspirations of going to play for Ohio State. So I grew up in a town right next to Centerville High School, where Kirk Herbstreit went to high school, which was a football town. There's a couple other guys that played at Centerville, sports talk show guys now. AJ Hawk, Centerville linebacker, absolute dude. So, great NFL career, and now he's with Pat. So, yeah, pretty exciting. small town, and I'm fortunate to play, a few different sports growing up, and my passion was always baseball, but I played football since the third grade. And, when I got to high school, I was 5'8", 140 pounds. So basketball was out the window. So my football coach said, "Hey, I need a wrestler." I'm like, okay. Never wrestled before in my life, but it was probably the best thing for me. Individual sport, point the finger at yourself, nobody else, and learn how to wrestle or you count lights. So it was a great time for me.
Yeah, I used to joke with shorter kids in high school that you would have played basketball if you were taller, but so you wrestle. And of course, I sort of meant it as a teenager, but I've grown up since then. Wrestling is an awesome thing for young men to do. It is absolutely, you learn a lot about yourself and you learn how to push through stuff. I mean, it's a great thing to do.
I agree. I grew up in Ohio, and wrestling's big in Ohio. And there's a lot to be said if you've put the time in a wrestling team. It's an individual sport with your buddies, basically. But anybody that's been an athlete, if you've wrestled, that's changed your other sport for sure. Your endurance and it's 2 minutes, it's 3 periods for 2 minutes, and you're going as hard as you can go for 6 minutes. There, not too many sports have you do that. You get a break, you get to sit in the huddle, you go in the dugout, you get a drink of water, kick a Gatorade bucket, and then go back on the field. So basketball, there's timeouts and, TV timeouts and quarters and half times. Wrestling, it's 6 minutes. So it's a great sport. I try to watch the NCAA tournament every year. And, I went to Ohio State when I was a kid to the wrestling camp. So, and they were, top 10 every year in wrestling. So it's a great sport.
Was making weight the way it is now, the way you guys did it back in the day?
No, it was totally different back then. I mean, there's stipulations now. You can only go down so far from your weight class. I was 140 pounds my senior year, and I went to 119. You can't do that now. But when I was a kid growing up in high school, it was the lower you went, the better chances you had to succeed going further. So, but nowadays they got the weight certifications that you got to certify by a certain date, and you can only go down at a certain weight class and I was running around my neighborhood every day, every night, sweating and cutting weight and wrestling and drilling and wrestling and drilling and lifting and, push-ups and sit-ups and jumping rope and to make weight. So, that's determination and grit and grind that everybody uses. And me and Carrie, my wife, we all say the same words a lot because we're in the same game. But wrestling's a different breed, dude. I'm telling you, it's a different person.
Is Vision Quest one of the best movies ever made?
I couldn't tell you how many times I've watched that movie. But yeah, and it was pretty much spot on. If you think of the sport of wrestling, that was a pretty good movie to kind of see what some people go through to make weight and finally beat the, Goliath, in the movie. So yeah, it was a great movie.
Yeah, my sense is, and I never wrestled, my sense is there's a Goliath in every weight division in every state in the country, right? There's the guy that everybody's trying to be.
Hands down, there's rankings out there, and sometimes it's, you don't have the toughest schedule, but you beat everybody. But then when you get into the big tournament and you wrestle 5 number ones from 5 different states, now you might not be that number one wrestler. So it's different state by state, Texas, Pennsylvania, Ohio, those are your big wrestling states. Oklahoma, big wrestling state. So you go to the NCAA tournament, who's at the top? Typically Iowa, Penn State, Oklahoma, Iowa State. Now some other schools are getting involved and starting to turn some heads in the wrestling world too. So it's pretty neat. I love to watch it. It kind of gets the fire going a little bit. Because I can watch it where some people don't have any idea what they're doing on the mat for 6 minutes, but it's different.
Wasn't there a huge upset recently, heavyweight division?
I think there was. I think Mendez repeated and all the Penn State boys repeated. And somebody, I think it was the heavyweight division,
Yeah.
upset the guy late in the third period to win his, to win the title. So I believe you're correct.
Yeah, he's a kid that went to the Air Force Academy, and then he transferred to a non-military school for a master's program, and he had a year of eligibility, and he had no business being in the championship match, and then he ended up winning it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
That's a great story.
It's an amazing story. Other stories like guys that wrestled, whenever they wrestle, whether it was the 60s, 70s, or the last 25, 30 years, guys that go their entire career and never lose in college. It doesn't make any sense to me. How do you go 149-0? It's otherworldly. It's almost like you're a different species.
Well, and they are. That's a different breed right there. You figure sooner or later you're going to have that off day. You just maybe not have your A game, and you got your B+ game. And when you're the top dog and you're 100-0, that means everybody's gunning for you. So you don't have a chance to take a day off. You don't have a chance to, I'm tired. I don't feel like working out today. That's what we preach when we're doing our softball and baseball stuff. It's like, you need to work out when you're tired. It's easy to work out when you feel 100%. It's easy to wrestle when you feel 100%, not when you're banged up and somebody's gunning for you. So It's amazing when you hear people 149-0 and, they won 4 NCAA tournaments and they're all Americans 4 years straight. And that's incredible.
It's wild.
They're a different athlete.
Yeah. And to your point about B+, maybe their B+ is good enough to go 149-0.
And it very well could be,
A+, yeah. All right. So baseball was your favorite coming up.
Yeah.
What was it about baseball?
I played it since T-ball, man. Back when I had a T-shirt for a jersey and blue jeans. No baseball pants back in the day. And it was just a sport that, I don't know, just it come natural to me. It was just, I played it every day with my brothers, my dad. And then, I played T-ball, all-stars, kind of a standout, little guy running all over. And then it just kind of carried on, minor league, major league. Back in the day, it was American Legion ball. And we had 4 different age groups, and I played on each one of them going through it, plus school ball at my high school, and summer ball, and we didn't have travel ball. We had American Legion ball, but we played all over the place. So it was just, live, eat, breathe it. That cliche, that was me. Family vacations, no, I didn't go. I think I've been on one family vacation in my entire life as a kid. And it was because I didn't have a baseball tournament.
Was it because you enjoyed playing the game so much, or you were just committed to it? You had set your mind to it, or was it a combination of the two?
I think it's both. I was really passionate about it and determined that, my mom, when I was 10 years old, my mom said, "What do you want to do when you grow up? You want to be a fireman, a police officer, trash truck driver?" I said, "Mom, I want my own baseball card one day. That's what I want. I want to play on TV, and I want my own baseball card one day." And she said, "Well, son, you know what? You work hard enough, you just might get it." Well, guess what? I took that thought and process, and it's a process. And I was always little and smaller than everybody else. So I had to work a little bit harder, basically proving myself all the time. So that was the motivation for me. And then family vacation come up. It's like, "Mom, I got a tournament. I'm going to play in the All-Stars over here, up in northern Ohio." And she's like, "Well, we're going to Minnesota fishing trip." "Mom, I'm not going to fishing. I want to play ball." So I would end up staying with the family or whoever, because that's what I wanted to do. And they were okay with it, because that's what I wanted to do. So
you're playing football, you're wrestling, and you're playing baseball, but it sounds like your summers were entirely dedicated to baseball until two-a-days started in August, I'm guessing.
That is correct. I played ball, football in Ohio, you play football, so two-a-days in July, I was going to those in the mornings and playing baseball in the evenings. And then in the winter, I was throwing the baseball, but I was also training for wrestling. And then wrestling finished, I went right into baseball through the summer, repeat, and just kept going. And then,
you ended up being a pitcher, but I imagine in high school you were pitching and playing. I'm guessing you were an infielder, but maybe I'm wrong.
I wanted to be an infielder, but I always had a pretty good arm, so I was always in the outfield somewhere, whether it be right field, left field, center field. I wasn't the greatest hitter ever, but I could hit the baseball and I knew how to bunt. So I was, I would play the outfield or I was pitching 2-3 days a week. And growing up as a kid, my favorite, player was Nolan Ryan. How could you go wrong with picking that guy? 7 no-hitters, 12 one-hitters. It's crazy. Bulldog. So I always wanted to pitch. And then I got that opportunity. University of Dayton asked me to come over there and play, put me on scholarship. And he's, you want to pitch or do you want to hit? And I said, I want to pitch. He said, well, leave your bat at home. So nice. I pitched every cent.
Well, what is it about pitching? Because I played baseball through high school, played Legion ball. They tried me every year to pitch because I had a strong arm, but I never took to it. And I think it's mostly a mental thing.
It's a lot of mental. A lot of sports are more mental than physical. A lot of kids are gifted. They got a 5-cent head. I hate to say that. Some kids think they're good. They've been told they're good, but they just don't have that mental approach to make them good. You got to be able to separate yourself. Physically, I wasn't a big specimen, so I had to do something else. So I had to learn how to pitch. And my dad and me in the backyard every day working on mechanics. It was mechanics. And that allowed me to have, considered a rubber arm I could throw all the time. So wasn't more on velocity that it is nowadays. It was, can you spin the breaking ball? Yeah, I was throwing a breaking ball when I was 8 years old. I wouldn't teach that now, but I threw everything but the kitchen sink when I was in high school. And I would keep hitters off balance and throw a lot of strikes, always around the plate, had good defense, and that wins a lot of ball games. So I take that work ethic that I had growing up, and that's how I coach, and that's how I instruct, and and that's what I preach.
So in order to be a good to great pitcher, you've got to have beautiful mechanics and a ton of practice, ton of what I would call physical memory for how to throw a good fastball versus a curveball versus a changeup.
Well, I preach muscle memory, and everybody around the country somewhat preaches the same thing. When everybody asks me, how did you get arm strength? I threw the baseball every day. Long toss, play catch, throw the baseball. Well, that's going to wear my arm out. No, you're going to build strength from that. Plus, I was doing push-ups and sit-ups, till I went to bed. So, and always running and doing foul poles and things like that. So my legs are always underneath me, but mechanically, I was able to, it's called muscle memory. So you're just repeating that motion over and over. And when you get it down and you let a ball go and it doesn't feel the same, now you have to have that mental approach of, well, what did I just do and how can I fix it quickly?
Yeah, it's wild to think about making it to AAA. And you spent a little time in the bigs?
I was up there 18 days, never got to pitch, but, kind of an insurance policy. I was considered a 4A player. I don't even think they mark them down at that. But I was the guy that could pitch and eat innings and win games in AAA and probably could have been a 4th starter in the big leagues somewhere. The only problem was I signed with the Atlanta Braves organization in the 90s. They were the greatest pitching staff in baseball history, in my opinion. That Bobby Cox, the manager, who's probably one of the greatest managers ever. Leo Mazzoni's one of the best pitching coaches ever, besides Stottlemyre. And I played behind, Maddox, Glavine, Smoltz, Kevin Millwood, Steve Avery.
Avery was there
Brett
too.
Woodall, Mark Woolers was in the bullpen. I mean, so and in the 90s, you don't hear about it now. Those guys were pitching 240, 250 innings every season, no breakdown. So there I sit in AAA, winning games, eating innings, doing what I need to do, no place to go. And big picture is I'm okay with that. I had a great time. I had a good career. I got to play. Do I got baseball cards? Yeah. Do I have memories? Absolutely. I wouldn't trade it for nothing.
Yeah, I mean those four. When I think of the four, and you mentioned Millwood, very good pitcher. Avery was a sneaky, very good pitcher. He didn't get the limelight the way Smoltz, Glavine, and Maddox did, but Avery was playoff game. I was at the Pittsburgh game in Pittsburgh back in, I think it was 91, and he pitched game 2. He shut him out.
Yeah, he was the up and coming Tom Glavine. Threw a little bit harder than Glavine did, but to his defense, he was one of the tops in the 90s. But he was I think he got hurt just a little too often and never really could find that groove where Maddox and Glavine, and then of course Smoltz come in later, but they didn't break down. They were eating innings and winning games and Cy Youngs, and of course now they're Hall of Famers. But Avery was up there too. He just had some injuries that kind of set him back.
Did you ever think about trying to get traded to another organization?
Well, I did, but of course I was a minor league player with not a lot of clout. I didn't sign for anything but a cup of coffee and a stir. And I took that, and I took the ball, and because I've had to prove myself forever. So here's another year. I signed with the Braves, and they send me to A-ball, and John Sherholtz is the GM, and he said, "Tommy, we're going to put you in A-ball." And I said, "Well, I've been playing college baseball for 4 years. Isn't that A-ball?" He said, "Yeah, but if you do what you're supposed to do and what we think you're going to do, you're not going to be there long." Well, I threw 38 scoreless innings. Mm. And I was over. Matter of fact, I was in Lynchburg playing against the Pirates in A-ball, and got the phone call and said, "Hey, we're sending you to Greenville in AA." So I go to Greenville the next day, and I pitch another month and a half. My pitching coach was Bruce Dale Canton, and I'm there about a month and a half, and we're up on the road in Knoxville, Tennessee, playing AA. And hey, you got a passport? I'm like, "Well, I think I do. My mom's got it somewhere. Can you call her?" I'm like, "What for?" "You're going to Ottawa, Canada." I'm like, "What for?" AAA's in Ottawa. They need a pitcher. Brad Woodall had went down with some rib muscle tear or pull or something. So I'm on a plane the next day after a month and a half in AA. I'm in Richmond. Bill Fisher's the pitching coach. There's a guy by the name of Grady Little's the manager. And man, was that was fun. That was fun. And I didn't know how long I was going to be there. I show up, they're playing a game. You're pitching tomorrow. You want to throw a bullpen? Sure, I'll go down, throw a little bit. How you feel? Great. Go take a shower. You're pitching tomorrow. 7 scoreless innings the next night out. Excuse me. I thought I was going to get sent back down. Woody come back off the DL, and they said, "We're going to keep you up here. You're doing nothing wrong." So I was there the rest of the year. We went in the playoffs that year, and it was a lot of fun. And next year I go to spring training. I'm feeling like I'm probably going to be in AA. Nope, I'm right back in Richmond. So 21 years old or whatever I was, playing in Richmond. I was one of the babies on the team.
Yeah, and you stayed in the Braves organization your entire career, right?
Yeah, I was there the whole time, and a lot of people, a lot of scouts that I know, and I run into them at games and high school stuff, and I see them, and we sit down and talk during the game, and they're like, "If you'd have been with anybody else," I said, "Yeah, I probably would have had, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, who knows, with somebody else." So, and could be in the big league time. So, it coulda, shoulda, woulda. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I've met a lot of people. I've got to play a lot of places that I probably would have never played in. They sent me to Australia my first year in winter ball. I wouldn't go back there other than to visit. There was guys over there swinging aluminum bats that looked like Mark McGuire. And then the pro guys over there were swinging wood. So it was, you make a great pitch on the inner half and you jam them and they hit a double. So, wood bat, that's broken.
Yeah.
So, but I enjoyed over there. I lived in Melbourne, had kangaroos in my backyard and whatnot. And the next year I'm in Richmond. Hey, we're going to send you to Dominican Republic. So I played in the capital, Santo Domingo, for Escogido. And they're always in the tops of the Dominican League. And that lineup there was incredible. All big leaguers and then me pitching. So it's like throw strikes, let him hit it, turn the double play, and get out of the inning. So
Yeah, baseball in that part of the world, that's their sport. That's their national
incredible.
sport.
It's incredible. People have no idea.
How does coaching staff know whether a pitcher should be a starter, a middle reliever, or a closer?
Honestly, I've done all of those. When I was in high school, I was a starter, and I would take the ball and not give it back till the game was over. That type of thought. That was my mentality. Don't come out. I'm not giving it back to you. Go to college, kind of the same way. When I pitched, I would take it to the 7th or the 8th, because in college you play 9, except getaway day, you're 7. So I would close. We played doubleheader on Saturday. I would close the first game and start the second game in college, and probably throw a complete game or something. And then in pro ball, I was a starter. And then I had Tommy John in 1998, which I was on the fast track, I think, to possibly go to the big leagues. I was in AAA for a couple of years there, winning games and doing well. And I was organization pitcher of the year 1 year in the minor leagues there for the Braves. And then I blew my arm out. I had a perfect game through 7 innings there at the Diamond, the first game of the year, 1998, because my daughter had just been born. So I left spring training a week early. So instead of opening day, I was the number 3 starter that week, because I had to watch the birth of my daughter. And I had a perfect game that night. And in the 8th inning, Eddie Perez was my catcher. And he put down fastball, and I let it rip, and it went in there like a slow pitch softball. He called time and said, "What are you doing?" Excuse me. I said, I threw that ball as hard as I could throw it. I said, "I think I hurt myself." And it felt like I had a lighter just sitting there. And I walked off the field. I finished the inning, walked off the field in the 8th, and said, "That's it." And flew to Atlanta the next morning, and down to Birmingham to probably the greatest surgeon ever, Tommy John surgery, and rehab for a year, and come back and pitch a couple more years. I was throwing harder, but I couldn't tell you always where it was going.
Yeah. That's an unnerving feeling for a pitcher.
It is livelihood, and basically that's all I wanted to do for a long time. The blessing was when my mom said, "You going back to school, aren't you?" "No, I'm playing ball." "You need to go back and get that degree." So my first year in pro ball, when I got back, I finished my degree. I had like student teaching, and I had to go to elementary school for 6 weeks and a high school for 6 weeks. And then I graduated. So, look at me now. I've been teaching 20 years, and, coach high school ball for 23 years. And so it's worked out. I just got to play some pro ball for about 10,
Yeah, I have to mention this because it still blows my mind. The best guy I ever saw play in the Richmond metro area at the high school level was a guy named Mike Milchin. He played on the Olympic team. He ended up making the Cardinals. He was in the show for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. And he was the most incredible first baseman I'd ever seen. He also pitched when it was time for him to pitch, and he had an amazing bat. He was the first 5-tool guy that I'd ever seen in person, and he ends up in the majors as a middle reliever. I'm like, he could be a dominant first baseman. I guess some coach along the way said, "You got to pick. What do you want to be? Do you want to be a pitcher, or do you want to be a first baseman?"
That's a true statement. There's been some other guys that's been in the big leagues that they just, after a while, they just don't hit. That wood bat changes a lot of people, and they're in the minor leagues, they're hitting, and they just stop. And then the next thing you know, they're like, "Hey, well, you got a pretty good arm. Let's put you on the bump or the mound." And next thing you know, they're in the big leagues pitching. The knuckleballer from the Pirates, he was a first baseman in the minor leagues. He's throwing knuckleballs. Tim Wakefield.
Yeah.
He's throwing knuckleballs in the outfield. Look what happened to him.
Yeah. Screwed around with knuckleballs.
Yeah, I mean, he's goofing off in the outfield. So he starts throwing bullpens. Next thing you know, he's in the big leagues. Wow. Storybook. It's just, who knows when you're a starter? I was always a starter, but, not everybody's a reliever. Coming in second and third, no outs, and you're not supposed to give up anything. The closer, that's a totally different role. I played with Rocker. He's a different person. But when he was on the mound, he was very good, and that's a totally different mental approach there. Those guys can get loose in 8 to 10 pitches. They're ready to come in. They're throwing 100, so. Yeah. But it's different being a starter or a reliever. I think after the first inning, everybody's a reliever, strictly because unless you're throwing a perfect game or a no-hitter, there's always going to be base runners on. So you're always pitching in stretch anyways. There's an error, there's a hit, you're going to hit somebody, you're going to walk somebody. So you're going to be pitching in the stretch. So, when I do lessons and instruction, I'm talking about the stretch because you're not going to throw a no-hitter every night. You're not going to shut everybody out. So you're going to have base runners on. So you need to learn with people on base. 70% of the time in the games, somebody's on base.
Yeah, I was going to say the percentage has got to be higher than 50%. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's about 75% of the time, so.
Yeah, it's right. I mean, the kids today should be, if they want to be great pitchers, they've got to pitch about 75% of the time out of the stretch, sounds like.
Absolutely.
All right, so who are some of your favorite teammates? Where did you get a chance to know Smoltz or Glavin or those guys?
I talked to Smoltz a few times. He was on a rehab stint down in Jacksonville and had some conversations with him. I played in the Dominican with the guy named David Ortiz. Now you call him Big Poppy. He was a 22-year-old AA Minnesota Twin first baseman. And special person there for sure. Obviously Hall of Famer now, ESPN, the whole 9 yards. Ruel Mondesi, who had the best arm in the big leagues for the Dodgers back in the day. He was my locker mate. 1 year in AAA, when you go on the road, you're rooming with somebody. Probably one of the greatest, best utility infielders ever to play, Mark DeRosa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Come through Richmond, played in Atlanta, played for the Cardinals. Now he's USA Baseball. He's the manager there. So, and he works for Major League Baseball tonight. So, I've had my path has crossed some pretty talented players over the years. So it's been, that's why I wouldn't change what I've done because of the people I've met and the places I've been, and just getting to rub elbows with some of those guys is incredible.
Yeah. When you decided to hang up your cleats and your glove, why Richmond?
Well, that wasn't by choice, but I was married at the time to my first wife. We were living in Hanover County, Hanover Country Club, and I went on. She took me to the ballpark. We pulled underneath it, there at the Diamond, and I said, "Hey," I said, "if I get on this road trip, we're going on 18 days." I said, "I get on the road trip, I'm good for the year." It was right about the time the draft was coming up, so I'm walking through the clubhouse, and I hear, "Harrison, I need to see you." I immediately knew I was getting my pink slip. Randy Engel was the manager. He was in A-ball when I was in A-ball, and now all of a sudden he's the manager of AAA these 10 years later, whatever it was. And I knew it was about time. I wasn't having the best year. I wasn't throwing it where I needed to. I was throwing harder, but my slider wasn't as tight. And, how do you say it? It run its course. And I knew it, and we had a good talk for probably an hour, 2 hours. And my wife come back and pick me up, and I had a chance to work out for the Diamondbacks. A friend of mine was one of the coaches over there, and I went out to Arizona 1 week and threw. And he said, "Tommy," he said, "you're still throwing it." He said, "but the slider's not as tight, and I don't think we're going to be able to pick you up." And on the plane ride back, I had, I've been thinking about it. My daughter was 2 years old, and I said, I'm 32, 33. I said, it's time for me to be dad, instead of ball player. So when I got back, Sherholtz called me and asked me if I wanted to be a pitching coach down in Myrtle Beach. They were starting that club down in Myrtle Beach. But coaching in pro ball is like playing in pro ball. You're living out of a duffel bag. Coaches, all they do is reports, nonstop on every player they play against and their own players. It's a lot of paperwork. Money wise is, probably not the greatest in the minor leagues to be a coach. And I didn't want to live in a hotel room every night, so it was time for me to step away and, be dad. So I did. I lived in Hanover County and I started doing camps. and instruction for some kids, and then I got asked to coach high school baseball with Dragon. Charlie Dragon was at Atlee High School, and he said, "Hey, look, I don't know anything about pitching. I'll do the hitting, you do the pitching, and we'll combine the defense." I said, "Deal." So I went over there and helped him a few years, and then he left to take over the new Hanover school. So I got the Atlee job and was there a few years. Wasn't teaching, just coaching, and working a couple side jobs or whatnot, and playing a lot of golf, and then I got out and started doing travel ball, running teams and things like that. We had a company called Diamond Dogs over there in Hanover Air Park. And back then it was Diamond Dogs in Hanover, and it was Bob Smith, RBA, over on Staples Mill. And those were the only two travel ball teams in the area. So you either played for us or you played for him. And now there's a baseball facility every other block, it seems like, and there's 800,000 different teams at every different age group. And the comical part about it is everybody's elite. But I'm in that world now, and I'm remarried to Carrie, and we have basically the same interests, other than the Michigan and the Ohio State. I knew her when I was at Diamond Dogs. She was previously married, and I was married at the time, and she was doing the softball stuff, and I was doing baseball and traveling, doing travel teams and things like that. And then, I don't know, one day it just, I was going through separation and she was doing the same, and we got together, and storybook ending there, and now we're married for 6 years and happy, and we have the same interests. We do the same stuff. She does softball, I do baseball, and we kind of come in the middle. And she had a facility, and I went over, joined her facility, and camps and things like that. So we're pretty happy.
The 2 times I've been around you and Carrie, you guys seem very compatible and very happy, which is the only way to be, right? That's what you're striving for. Absolutely.
I mean, if it was, I couldn't. I'm not going to say we don't argue, but I don't argue. I've always said this, and I hate to say it this way, but I'm a black and white person. And I did it when I was coaching, and I would tell people, I don't care who your dad is, I don't care who your mom is. This is what we do here, and this is what we're going to do. And basically, if you don't like it, you can transfer down that school down the block. So it's just a mental approach, like we talked about earlier in this show. It's just, I don't have time for a whole lot of drama. And Carrie's the same way. I don't have time for that, negativity. And, we try to stay upbeat. And, we're teaching kids. I tell people all the time, why do you do it? Why are you still in it? I want a kid, and I think I've told you this before, I want to see a kid do what I had the chance to do, because that's not too many kids that get the opportunity that I had. They play high school ball, and some guys go to play, NAIA or D3 or D1 even. And that's it. And then they get a job. So, I was fortunate enough to keep playing for another 10. So, I'd love to see a kid get that same opportunity. And I've had some kids that have excelled and done that. So it's neat to see, kids that I've coached now are now young men, and they're coaching college baseball. I got one at Marshall. He's doing a great job. He will be a head coach sooner or later. He's putting a good track record together. So it's gratifying to know that you've had your hands on a lot of kids over the years, and see how they grow up and become, fine young men, and even women. I've taught a lot of girls softball, so it's pretty neat to see.
Do you have any of your former players make it to the big league?
Well, there was a kid from Deep Run High School back in the early 2000s. He was about 6'4", 6'5", righty, about 185, 190 pounds. Played at Deep Run High School. Gangly kid, all-state quarterback. Played at Deep Run. Probably had a chance to go in the draft. They passed on him. He went to Georgia Tech. Played 3 years at Georgia Tech. Calls me the night of the draft after his junior year. He said, "Coach, I just went first round. What do you want?" I said, "Son, I don't want nothing." I said, "I want a handshake when I see you." Deck McGuire.
Wow.
And I think he just stepped away the last couple years. So it's been pretty neat to see him grow up, and, he's probably set all the records at Georgia Tech, I think. first round pick, 10th, 11th overall with the Toronto Blue Jays.
Wow. That's wild.
Yeah. So I've had my hands on some kids, and that's what's neat to see them excel, get them at 14 where they're greener than the grass, and they really don't, they think they know. But, someone like myself that has been there and played, they kind of listen a little bit more than listening to mom and dad when it comes to baseball. That me and Carrie say it all the time. That's why we're in business. I told him that last week. Yeah, but you're dad. And you tell him that every day in the car, at dinner, at breakfast, at lunch, at church, So it falls on deaf ears sometimes. So it's good to get some different opinions and words. And, I'm probably saying the same thing, but wording it differently. You got to be able to relate to people. So my educational background, being a teacher and dealing with kids every day, that's probably helped me try to get my point across. Because you got to, I do 10 lessons in a day. I have to say it 10 different ways, but I've said the same thing 10 times. You know what I'm saying? So it's different. It's a different way to relate to kids. And it's great to see when they really excel, because you can see the facial expression change. It's like light bulb goes off right away. Got it. So it's neat to see.
That's really neat. I ask every athlete who becomes a coach, or every former athlete who goes on to do other things in life, but I don't think you have an answer to this question, Tommy, based on this conversation. Did you have any other interest in school besides sports? It sounds like you were doing push-ups and sit-ups in your spare time, and you didn't have time for anything outside of sports.
Look here. I tell people all the time, when everybody sits around the house at 6:30 at night when you're a kid back in the day, and mom's reading the paper and dad's reading the magazine, and you're watching the news at 6:30 right after Fonzie and Laverne and Shirley come on. Everybody had dinner at the dinner table. When we'd sit around, I'd lay on the floor and stretch and do crunches and do push-ups like commercials. That's what I would do. It's just, my dad's like, "Hey, you gonna stretch?" "Yes, sir." It's just, if you're going to do it, you got to do it the right way. And, going to eat that bowl of ice cream or do 15 crunches first, it's different. But growing up, did I want to do anything else? No. I tell people now, I preach it all the time. There's more to life than wins and losses, so when I'm talking now, I'm talking life lessons, because I've already been there and done it. But growing up, it was baseball. My favorite player of all time is Pete Rose. It's unfortunate he was at an establishment about 10 minutes down the street that I grew up on, and was in the back doing, some betting or whatnot. And but I think he should be in the Hall of Fame.
I do
too. But did I want to do anything else? No. My dad said, "Well, if you can't play baseball, what are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I want to coach." He said, "Well, probably should be a PE teacher." Okay.
Yeah, makes
sense. So I got my degree, pre-K through 12 education and physical education and exercise science and some other title or whatever. But yeah, I wanted to coach when I was done. And my last few years with the Braves, every time I went to spring training, I had fungo in my locker. So like when I wasn't throwing a bullpen or pitching, I was hitting fungos, the outfielder, the infielders, or ground balls, and I was always listening to how the coaches were trying to get their point across. So that actually helped me when I started my coaching career, basically. And it was from AAU ball or travel ball now to high school baseball kids, because everybody's different. You're trying to get them to join up and be one, 14 different attitudes and 14 different type players is tough to coach. So
14 different intellects. Yeah. 14 different psyches. Yeah. The whole thing.
Yeah.
Tommy, how old were you when you first played golf?
When I first played baseball?
No, golf.
When I first started playing golf, I played a couple times in college, but it was just, run around the golf cart. I played a few times with my dad growing up, but nothing special. I didn't really start playing golf till I started playing pro ball. And if I wasn't pitching, I'd go right to the clubhouse, say, "Hey, get me a tee time. I got to work out. I'm heading to the golf course." So I pretty much played every day. And that's how I learned how to play. I didn't have a swing coach. I didn't get lessons. I just, I was athletic, and I just started banging the ball and making adjustments and now me and Kerry play every weekend. And now if I had to do it over again, hindsight 2020 or whatnot, I'd have probably tried to play golf when I was in high school.
Yeah, but golf, I imagine where you grew up back then, golf wasn't a big deal.
It was not, and golf season in Ohio is the same time football. It's a fall sport there, and definitely not was going to happen.
There's just no way.
No, I'm growing up. You're playing football.
What position? I'm going to come back to golf in a second. What position did you play in football?
I was like a flanker, slot back. I played quarterback, and I had really good hands, and you could throw it anywhere, I'd catch it. I wasn't the fastest guy, so I had to juke and jive and make my yardage that way. But yeah, I was like a flanker, receiver.
Yeah, back in the day, playing receiver, I imagine the rules were different. You got walloped pretty good going across the middle from time to time.
Yeah, it was tough going across the middle, especially my size. I was thinking when I went to University of Dayton, played. Mike Kelly was the head coach at University of Dayton. They were D3 at the time. Their biggest rival was Mount Union. It was either Dayton or Mount Union winning the national title at the Stag Bowl. So 2 of the 4 years I was at Dayton, they won the national title. They had this little blonde-headed guy named John Gruden as the offensive coordinator. And so I asked my coach my freshman year, I said, hey, look, I'm thinking about playing football next fall. He said, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the end of that. So, and I went there for baseball, but I think I probably could have made that team somehow. And that would have been neat, play for John Gruden, But yeah, it's been pretty neat.
Yeah, if you've got good hands, you can certainly make a D3 roster, even as good as Dayton was back then.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So golf, are you a scratch golfer?
No. I want to be, but I don't practice. I hate to say that. We just go out and play. I probably shoot anywhere from 72 to 77 pretty much all the time. My game's gotten a little better. I've controlled that driver a little bit, not swinging like a gorilla, and just letting it swing do the work. But pretty much, I think I'm like a 3. Which is I'm not afraid to play any, get in a group. Hey, you want to play golf this weekend? No, I don't want to play with you. You're pretty good. That doesn't really bother me. I don't care if you're good or bad. I just like to play golf.
You talked to Kevin and me about playing when we were out at that camp. I guess it was the last day of that camp. And
yeah,
I said, Tommy, you absolutely do not want to be on a course with me. I'm going to lose 10 balls at least.
Well, I tell people all the time, I said, I don't care if you hit the ball sideways and backwards, just don't play slow. And, they make golf balls every day. So if you lose one, just drop one, keep trucking.
Yeah. Speed. If you can maintain the speed, even if you're going to swing the club 100 times. Yeah. It's fine. Who cares? Yeah, I'm with you. All right. So you're working in Henrico County now. What school are you at?
I'm at Short Pump Middle School. This is my one. I got out of Stafford 5 years ago. Yeah, this is my 4th year at Short Pump Middle School.
Okay. Are you coaching the baseball team? You're not coaching at all?
No. When I took the job, I knew the principal. When I left Stafford, I was going to finish my contract up there. I stepped away from baseball, and I talked to the principal. It was funny. It was just how, it's how God's plan or whatnot. But I got a phone call that weekend, and it was a principal from Short Pump Middle School. I had worked with a daughter in lessons, and I've worked with a son in lessons, and he went to Benedictine, played at JMU. She said, hey, you still looking to get closer to home? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. She said, put your paperwork in. I think I might have a spot by Christmas. So, I did all the paperwork and whatnot, and went up, told my principal, I said, look, if I take that job, I'm out by Christmas. He said, I'm not going to hold you. He said, I can't believe you stayed up here this long, because I was living in Montpelier, driving to Stafford.
Yeah, that's a haul.
Doing my thing, and I was coaching golf, baseball, which my baseball program basically went year round, and I was also helping out an assistant AD. So I lived at Stafford and slept here, and was on the road a lot, and I just got tired of it. And it was right around COVID is when I decided, what, it's we won the state title, and we had a chance to go back to back. We had everybody back, and COVID hit right there at the beginning of the season, and I went back to school the following year in 21, I think it was. And I said, you know what? I woke up and I said, I think I'm done. Carrie said, what do you mean you're done? I think I'm going to step away from baseball, coaching. And so I had a long talk, and that job opened up in December 5th. And I've been at Short Pump ever since. But I told her, I said, please don't ask me to coach. I'm not coaching. You know, I didn't want to coach middle school sports. And I'll leave that to the young teachers that are, you know, all energetic and wanting to get involved, but I've already done my time there. So, but I talk to the kids all the time about the games, and I've stopped by and watched some middle school football games. And, you know, kids, I don't care what grade level they want to see you at your sporting events once in a while. So I try to stop by and see a little bit.
All right, let's talk about Cincinnati Reds. When you were growing up in Ohio, Dayton's not that far from Cincinnati.
45 minutes.
Yeah. You are literally living through the golden age of the Reds as a kid, right? The Big Red Machine was awesome.
Incredible.
They were unbelievable. They had studs. It seemed like at every position. They had a great pitching staff. Like they were really, really good. Tommy, you know this better than I do. They haven't been good for a while. Like early 90s maybe was the last time they were competitive.
Honestly, they haven't been competitive since the 90s for sure. You know, when I was growing up, it was the Big Red Machine. And then, you know, Mark Schott got involved, and they had some stellar, you know, they had the Nasty Boys, and Rob Dibble, Norm Charlton, Randy Myers, Chris Sabo was playing third base, Barry Larkin, you know, little guy from Moeller's playing, you know, shortstop. They had some good years. As a matter of fact, I went to 1990. The first two games of the World Series was against Oakland, the Bash brothers, Mark McGuire and Canseco. And me, my mom, and dad went down to Cincinnati game 1 and 2. And that's when they swept them 4-0. That wasn't supposed to happen. And Jose Rio and the whole 9 yards, Mario Soto and the Nasty Boys took care of business in 4 straight. So I think that might be the last time they were good. It's a shame to say that because, you know, everything runs in a cycle, but, you know, they just don't spend the money like other clubs do. And, you know, they got one of probably the top players in baseball right now there, but I don't think he's going to stay there for long, Dela Cruz.
Dela Cruz is going to be a Dodger or a Yankee at some point.
It won't be long. You know, it's just how it's the nature of the game. But I wish the Reds were good, you know. But it's a shame. You know, I grew up in Riverfront Stadium. Pete Rose and Dave Concepcion and Cesar Cedeno and George Foster hit a ball almost out of the ballpark at Riverfront, and Johnny Bench, you know.
Just incredible.
Tony Perez, and, you know, and then it become Paul O'Neill in right field, and Griffey Sr. And I faced Griffey Jr. He was at Cincinnati Moeller, I think. I was a freshman, and we played Moeller down at St. Xavier. And I think he hit a ball off me. It might still be going. But, you know, Griffey was just, I mean, you talking about 5 tools.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a freak. It's a shame he was injured and got hurt a lot, but that's how he played the game. You know, he probably could have the all-time home run record for sure, but he didn't play long enough because injuries kind of prevented that. Now you look at Bryce Harper, probably one of the better players in the game, right? What did he finally do? Now he plays first base. Probably the smartest move ever. Less wear and tear on the body, and he plays a reckless abandon when he plays. And you know, look, I think it's going to extend his career a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's smart. And Griffey Jr., I mean, I've been watching baseball since the 70s. He's, I think, the smoothest guy I've ever seen play baseball. There's no wasted motion. It's art almost, the way he plays the game.
I grew up watching Doug Drabeck, you know, Kenta Colvey, Andy Van Slyke, you know, was it Dwight Gooden, Darryl Strawberry? He hit a ball off me in Richmond. I think it landed in Sportsbacker Stadium before it was Sportsbacker Stadium.
For the listening audience, that's quite the shot.
I mean, it was. I thought I popped him up. You know, I threw a fastball in the outer half about 93, 94, and he took it. So I went out there again, and he hit it, and I heard it go up, and I looked up, and I'm like, oh, that's a fly ball to right field. But that ball went into the night. So next day he was on ESPN getting called back up to the Yankees. My dad said, "Why didn't you hit this bitch?" I said, "Dad, I'm a competitor, man. That's Darryl Strawberry. I'm trying to get him out.
Right.
It is what it is.
He's a ball
and that
player.
wasn't the last home run I give up. Yeah.
So I have a guy that listens to the recordings before they're published, and then he does summary notes for me. Not that I can't do that, but he really enjoys listening to these episodes. And I will tell you, Tommy, he's an Ohio State fan since he was born because his dad went to Ohio State, and he's not super obnoxious about it, but you definitely know he's an Ohio State fan during football season. Do you have any words for my my summary guy?
Well, I'm a Buckeye. I don't really toot the horn. I don't rub it in, because I've always raised, and I preach it now the same way as my daddy brought me up, was you need to learn how to stay humble, because right about the time you think you're good, there's always somebody better. So, Buckeye fans are obnoxious. They're rowdy and stupid, and not that I'm saying your buddy there is, but
he's not.
I'd rather, watch the game. I don't get too excited, but I get excited when something really happens. 4 straight in the playoffs. I don't think I slept. It was electric. But you have those days where you're good, but you don't want to say anything because you don't want to jinx it either. Superstitions, and don't talk about it. Let's just watch the game. So. But a lot of people, they just talk, and then the team gets beat, and then they have an excuse about something else. Don't make excuses. You put your pants on the same way I do. Did you show up and play, or did you? So
yeah. My buddy approaches Ohio State football the same way you do. He's quite humble about it, but he's a fan. Like he enjoys when they do well in the national championship game, when it was kind of no doubt that Ohio State was going to win. It was probably the happiest he's been maybe in his life.
Oh, I stayed up and watched every interview until they were done. I saw the golf cart get run into the wall with all the studs on, heading to the interview. Ryan Day's in the front seat, goes on. He almost goes, through the golf cart. I stayed up and watched every interview because that was my team that, won the national title, and it's exciting to hear what they had to say. And, but they, nowadays it seems like everybody has the same script.
Yeah.
They talk after a win, they thank the right people, then they preach team, and then, move on to the next day. It's almost like it's scripted, but some of those guys speak from the heart, and you can tell that they're in it for the right reasons. I'm not a big fan of NIL, but I wasn't a fan of you selling my jersey and making money off it either. So I know where that's coming from. So I don't know. Yeah. Stay humble, because it could bite you in the butt one day.
Hey, so you're doing the thing at Short Pump Middle. You're PE teacher there, and you're also continuing to do instruction, whether it's hitting or pitching. Do you have enough clients right now, or?
But I used to do, Carrie does 70, 80 lessons a week, every week. I used to be in that same boat when I got out of coaching early and just did lessons. I was doing it full time. I was doing 70, 80 lessons a week, every week. I was working Saturdays and Sundays and traveling and coaching. And then I went back to coaching because I missed coaching, and I was kind of getting burnt out doing lessons. And now, I might do 3 or 4 a day. And if you call me, I'm not going to say no. But I don't really, my name's out there already because I've been doing lessons, 20, 25 years, almost 30 years. And if you want to come see me, I'll help you any way I can, but I don't make a post on Facebook, and I'm not on Twitter or Instagram or Snapchats and tweets. I don't have any of that, but, I don't advertise. It's a lot of word of mouth, and, hey, I noticed your son's getting a little better. What's he been doing? He's been going to this guy named Harrison. So I should probably promote it a little bit, but I teach all day. I got kids all day, and then I go over our building's right up the street from where I teach about 8 minutes, and Mama's in there working all night, so we spend some time in there teaching side by side, and then I finish up and come home and do it again the next day, and play golf on the weekends.
Where's your daughter these days? What's she up to?
She is living actually about 10 miles right down the street here. She lives here in Hanover County, works for a orthodontist, and grandbaby's 4 years old, Carter, and she's playing, I think, a little bit of t-ball, but not sure if she wants to play that yet or not, and kind of hands off on that,
Yeah. Is it fun being a granddad?
Yeah, we don't get to see her that often as much as we want to, but it is what it is, because we're busy all the time too, and I know everybody has schedules. So, but we got Cooper still in the house here, and Brock's out doing his thing. He's 20, and Cooper's a senior at Collegiate, getting ready to go to West Virginia next year and study history. And matter of fact, tomorrow he's giving his senior speech over at Collegiate, so we're going to go over and watch that. So, pretty special times here, watching them grow up, and young men now, they're not boys. And matter of fact, Cooper's just turned 19, and he's going to graduate here in another week or two, and he'll be at West Virginia. So you need to find me. I'll be at West Virginia Pitt game 3.
Yeah, I mean, why not do as much of those games as you can while he's there, right?
Yeah. So, but we're looking forward to it. We're excited for him. I'm not sure where West Virginia come from when people ask, but he's always talked about going to West Virginia, and he got accepted, put his paperwork in next week, got accepted, and he's all tickled pink. So we're happy for him.
Tommy, I have no idea what he's like as a young man, but back in the day, Morgantown was known as the party capital of colleges, kind of thing. I don't know if it still has that reputation.
Well, my booster president when I was in Stafford was the punter kicker at West Virginia. He's about the same age as me, and we called him and let him know that Cooper got accepted. He's going to West Virginia. He's like, I'm in. I'm tailgating. So I've heard the same thing you've heard. Matter of fact, they had a kid there that played at Prince George High School named Tevin Tucker. Just finished his career at West Virginia. I think he's playing some pro ball now. I coached against him when he was at Prince George High School. So pretty neat to see some local kids move on. And he was at West Virginia the day we went up to show Cooper the school. He was playing. So we walked across the street, watched him play. So it was kind of neat.
Yeah.
They're
really
top
neat.
25 in the country.
Yeah, that's wild. Wild.
I'm kind of excited to see what old Rich Rod's going to do there at West Virginia as he comes. He's back at West Virginia, and
He's back.
Yeah, he's back, and he said, the only reason I come back, I got a chance to win a national title. I don't know what he's thinking, saying those kind of words, but I guess you got to say something as a motivational wallpaper or something, however you want to word it. But he was there, left, and now he's back.
It seems like he has changed schools on average every 18 months.
Well, he went from West Virginia. He went to Michigan, then he went to Arizona. Now he's back at West Virginia. So he's an offensive guy, which you got to get the players too. Just because you got the schemes don't mean you got the talent to run it. So it'll be interesting to see. But we decided to go to the big rival game this year, Pitt, West Virginia. It's weird because it's game 3 of the season, but I guess it's just how it falls.
Well, they've added so many different teams to these conferences now that it's kind of a scheduling nightmare.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, hey, I'm sorry you're a Reds fan. My buddy who's an Ohio State fan is also a Reds fan. And I have another buddy who's a big Reds fan. And so the 70s were really rough for me listening to those two talk about the Reds all the time. And then when they swept the A's in 90, and they weren't even supposed to win the series. It wasn't even supposed to be competitive. And then they swept them. Oh.
Yeah, that was kind of devastating to Major League Baseball, I believe, at the time in the 90s, because that wasn't supposed to happen. All the talk was Oakland and the staff, Dave Stewart and all of them. And then the Bash brothers, Carney Lansford mixed in there as well, so that wasn't supposed to happen in the break. And I'm sorry, the Reds just put it on them,
Put it on them.
I mean, put it on them quick. Chris Sabo hit 2 home runs the first night, and boom, boom, bam, game over.
game over, and kind of the vibe by the end of the second game was like Reds got this. Like Oakland can't do anything with them.
Yeah, they had the shut down bullpen. So if they were winning and you got to the bullpen, it was over. So it was neat to see. But I played for the Braves. I like the Braves. Don't get me wrong. I root for the Braves as well. But yeah, deep down, I'm a Reds fan. I tell people all the time, I'm a Reds fan. But I played for the Braves, so I got a lot of buddies.
They're your second favorite team, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Tommy, I appreciate you doing this, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Loved it. Thanks for having me out.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also really appreciate if you'd rate and review us. You can find us at scodupodcast.com.